Charles Davy is a longtime wrestling card collector who's better known as Chuckster in the hobby community. He joins us today to share a bit about his background and what he's up to today. Welcome, Chuckster.
Hi, Mike. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and we were just kind of talking before the show. We've interacted online. We've been a part of several of the same shows over the years, but we've never actually had a chance to be on the same panel or have a direct conversation. So this is a great opportunity for us to chat a little bit today. I want
Looking
to
forward.
start with, how did your wrestling card collecting journey start?
Well, to be honest with you, unlike most other wrestling card collectors, I was not a fan of wrestling as a kid. I didn't get into wrestling until I was in my early 20s. So we're looking about the mid 1980s when that happened. I'm probably the oldest collector around here. I'm 65. So I didn't get into wrestling until I was in my 20s. And my first set that I bought was the 87 tops, opening them by packs and putting a set together. And it was kind of fun, and I never really got into wrestling cards at the time. When I was a kid, most of my card collecting dealt with pop culture stuff like Batman and Dark Shadows and the Monkees and the Beatles and all of those cards that were big in the 60s, because that's when I was a kid. And I didn't at the time realize I was collecting. I was a kid and I was just getting cards. I didn't even know what a card collector was. I just, all the kids in the neighborhood was buying them and trading them back and forth. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s and I went to my first indie wrestling show, and a friend of mine was really into wrestling. And after that, I got my first set. And I thought, wow, these are pretty cool. So I just started looking around to see what else might be out there. And lo and behold, started coming a lot of wrestling cards. But again, at the time, I was only WWF at the time fan. So WWF was all I knew. I didn't know there was indie cards. I didn't know there was Japanese stuff. I didn't know there was other things like that. So I just went after all the WWF stuff. As my interest in wrestling became more clear that I really liked this, and this was something I was going to be into, I started doing research on wrestling and found out about other sets. So I started chasing other lesser known sets. I had no idea in my early 20s that this was going to turn into a lifetime career of collecting cards. As a matter of fact, like I've told Paul and Tony before, my collection includes probably 500 sets, give or take. And as a matter of fact, they're all on the shelves here behind me, binder after binder. But at the time, you had one or two card sets and you thought, well, that's something. But then when I started going down those rabbit holes and finding these little things, it just became an obsession with me. It's like, I got to have everything. So I became, at the time, like Paul from Wrestling Card Price Guide always said, we were both set collectors. We tried to do, we just tried to get everything, master set collectors. So that's what I did for years, was just go after master sets. Once parallels became the norm, my master set collecting days was out the window because I just wasn't chasing all the parallels, but I still did all the base cards and all the insert sets. So that's kind of how I got into this, was just from a friend who casually took me to an indie show one time. And that was the start of everything, and been hooked ever since.
So you started getting the bug from an indie show, but it was at that point, though, the WWF cards that were the first cards you collected. You talked about having hundreds and hundreds of different sets, and the knowledge that you've gained over those years. Every day I continue to learn more and more about wrestling cards. And as somebody who loves to learn, I have a strong appreciation for other collectors who've been around a long time and are willing to share their knowledge. And that's one of those things that I appreciate about you. Do you collect other things, or had you collected other things since, you were a kid? As you kind of transitioned, you mentioned things that you were acquiring as a kid, but as an adult before wrestling cards, were you collecting other things?
My biggest collection has always been wrestling. And not only did I collect wrestling cards, but before I sold my house, I had a room full collection of wrestling figures. I had well over 1,000 of those. I collect wrestling magazines. which go way back. I still have those. I couldn't bear to part with those. The figures, when I moved into a smaller apartment, I knew I wasn't going to have any room for them. So I begrudgingly sold them to a toy store up in Pittsburgh, who gave a really good deal on it. And I couldn't see me boxing them up and putting them in storage and never being seen again. It was time for other collectors to get a hold of them, because I had some rare stuff in there. I had Hasbro's and Remco's and, you know, early Jakks Pacific and Bendham's. I had just about everything. And between the wrestling cards and the magazines and the figures, collecting was really overtaking. I used to say I had a good collection, and eventually the collection had me. You know, I used to own one, and then it ended up owning me. And that's when I decided I needed to slow down a little bit. I was just getting in over my head. So that's kind of what I collected.
So you've talked about then that, that collection evolved over time, right? It was, it was broader than just cards, but cards was a big focus. You had the figures. I guess, I wanted to ask if you changed directions, and you kind of indicated that you have. Was it hard to change directions? You mentioned that you were collecting, but then that collection owned you a bit. Was it hard to shift your focus and change directions?
It was, because I was obsessed with it. I mean, I would go into a store. Friends of mine would laugh at me. They would go along with me. We'd go on a wrestling hunt, and we'd go out of town, and we go into a store, and if I saw an action figure, say, on the shelf, and I look on the back and it says, "Oh, there's 6 in this series," I wouldn't leave that store unless I had all 6 of them. Whether I wanted them or not, for some reason, I had to have them. I just had to have everything perfect. And so when I cut back, it was kind of hard to lose it, because I had invested so much time and energy and years into collecting this. But I knew it was time to kind of narrow down my outlook again a little bit, because I had retired at the time when I sold my house, and obviously making really good money working to just a monthly retirement check wasn't going to fulfill my hobby needs anymore. I had to do something to just narrow my collection and still stay within the hobby. And wrestling cards just seemed to be the right thing to do, because they're easy to store. There's so much history on them. You got pictures, you got bios on the back. You can still keep up with everything. So, cards have just become my main focus when it comes to wrestling. The only other card that I might still look at, if they ever come out with again, is Batman. Batman has always been my favorite since I was a kid. And I collected the very first Batman set pack by pack when I was 6 years old. Batman has always been kind of my little go-to away from wrestling if I want to collect.
You've talked about your focus being on sets. And you mentioned, cutting back with the parallel era and the transition. Now that we've gotten in parallels, you're still focused on kind of the base and inserts. Is there any focus within that, or do you go after pretty much everything? The AEW sets, the WWE sets, all of the proliferation of indie sets that we've seen. Are you kind of going after all of those base card sets now, or have you narrowed your card focus even more?
I have unfortunately had to narrow it even more, because as much as a fan as I was of putting together a full base set, financially, I just can't afford to do it with the new WWE releases that are out, because they're just beyond my grasp financially. Not that I wouldn't like to have them, I just can't afford to do so. I got the first 3 AEW sets because I'm a major AEW mark. I love AEW. So I did go after the first 3, and I went hog wild on the very first one. I ended up like opening 8 or 10 boxes of that. I was crazy about it. And but my focus now has gotten away from going after the new ultra modern, shiny, expensive stuff, because I can't afford those. What I have decided to do is take the money that I would have spent on that, and I have gone back now to filling in holes in my older collections, because Topps was releasing sets left and right for the longest time. And no sooner would they get a set released than the next set would come out, and I wasn't finished with the set that came out before it yet. So I now have the time and the finances to go back and say I'm missing one insert set from 2015. I can go back and find that insert set and finish it. And now I'm a completist on that set again. And I love doing that. And I can, and they're not quite as expensive as they would have been, you know, in the modern day. And the other focus I'm on is the indie stuff. I love indie card wrestling. So that helps complete my OCD for getting a master set again, because you can buy a box of indie cards. It's everything in there, one and done. You got it. And I'm a completist again. I kind of can fill that little void of saying, hey, I'm a completist again. So filling in old sets and focusing on indie sets have really been my current frame that I like to go after right now.
You mentioned that you used to go to some of these stores. You were going on a wrestling hunt, trying to see what you could find, where you were going with other people. Were those other folks that you were going with, were they collectors also, or were they just friends that were kind of along for the ride?
They were friends that were along for the ride. They kind of got used to me being a wrestling fan. Most of my friends are not wrestling fans, believe it or not. I have a couple that are, but most of them aren't. But they got to know wrestling just from being around me. And they would humor me when we go somewhere. It's like, oh, I guess we're going to the wrestling store again. Yeah, we're going to go get some wrestling stuff. And they actually got to know what I was looking for. So sometimes they'd be out. I'd get a phone call from, hey, I'm standing in Toys R Us. You know, I found this. Do you want this? Yeah, pick it up. You know, and they would find stuff online, and they'd hear me talking about it. So they would. A friend of mine actually bought me the action-packed Undertaker autograph one year for a gift. It's
Wow.
like, you don't have this, do you? And I said, no. And I opened it up and I'm shaking. I was like, are you kidding me? She said, no, it's just, you know, a gift from us. You know, we want you to have it. So they got to know what I liked, and hearing me talk, they knew what was important and what was just kind of fluff, you know. So my friends, although they don't follow wrestling much, they know I'm into it, and they don't make fun of me anymore. Because being a wrestling fan is so much harder than being a regular sports fan. You know, you gotta take a lot of guff to get there. But yeah, like I said, I'm focused mostly on just filling in old sets now, because I can't afford to do that. And I've noticed too, lately, we have enough new faces in the hobby to cover the new, what I like to call ultra modern era, like the Prism stuff and the Panini stuff. But I don't want to lose sight of the old school cards, because they really are the pillars of our hobby. And the newer people coming into it are just focusing on all the newer stuff that's coming out, and they might kind of forget or neglect the old stuff. I want to be one of these old school guys that still have the knowledge about them and know what's out there, and keep focus on them too, because you just don't want to lose the history of wrestling cards. And that's what these old school sets are, I feel. You know, I just don't want people to forget that they're out there, and they do have a meaning to this hobby. There's something kind of important.
You know, it's one thing to collect as a solitary activity, and it's a whole different thing to participate actively in kind of a community. What prompted you to start engaging with other collectors?
The pandemic.
Hmm.
When I retired right about the time the pandemic hit, and I was sitting at home doing nothing but twiddling my thumbs. And I thought, well, I'm just going to go back and start kind of getting my collection a little more organized. Now, I've been a frequent contributor and a user of WrestlingTradingCards.com for a long time. And I got a hold of Tony at the time when he was getting ready to re-update the site. And he said, can you help? And I said, absolutely. So that's when I became the senior contributor. I started, they had stopped updating about 2014. So everything on his site from 2014 up to about 2020 was about 90% my work. And I was putting checklists together. I was scanning photos to him. And once I started doing that, he said, well, you know, everybody's on Twitter, and everybody's saying Twitter is the place to be for wrestling cards. Okay, I'm not much of a social media person. I had a Facebook, but it's mostly for family and friends, and it's not really a wrestling thing. So I got on Twitter, and I was surprised when I got on there how many people actually knew who I was, because of my work with the WTC over the years and being on their little chat boards for years. And it just got fun. I'm actually, like you said, every day I'm learning something new from these guys. They could be new collectors in the hobby and spring something on me from way back when. It's like, wow, I didn't know that. And I mean, that's what I like about the community. Everybody tries to help each other and teach each other. You know, it can get a little heated at times, but I try to stay away from that. I like everybody, and I try to get along with everybody. So, and you just don't know how much I appreciate all the help that everybody's been with me. Sharing my collection has been fun. I've helped Paul. I think you've had Paul and Ann on your show here just recently.
Yeah.
I his site a good bit, and I helped Tony with his site. So those are kind of that's my hobby nowadays, is helping get the information out there as much as it is collecting. So I've got a lot of free time, so I'm on the keyboard a lot.
You mentioned a few of the positives that we've experienced within the wrestling card community. Is there something about it that you like the most? Is there a piece of that that you enjoy the most?
No, not really. It's just that just the people sharing what they have and sharing their knowledge. I enjoy that, and I actually enjoy the camaraderie with some of the people. But a lot of people are really nice, and they'll reach out to me personally on direct message instead of online, and I've developed a little rapport offline with a lot of people, and that's been fun, meeting new friends. And last summer, I made it to my first ever national sports car convention, and it was in Atlantic City, New Jersey, which is about a 6-hour drive for me. Paul was going to be there. Tony was going to be there. A couple other guys online that I knew was going to be there. I went, and I actually got to meet in person these people that I've dealt with online for so many years. I'd never met them in person, just on these little chat rooms and and Twitter feeds and stuff like that. And to actually meet them and hang out with them and go to dinner and just hang out on the boardwalk and hang out at the convention hall. It was fun just getting to meet everybody. That's making new friends in the hobby at 65 years old was pretty cool to me. So,
Yeah, that is an awesome experience. I had a similar experience at the 2019 National in Chicago. That was the first year, from my perspective, that was a period of time, 2018 into 2019, you started to see a lot of hobby content start up. There were more and more podcasts starting. There were more and more web video shows starting. Live streamers were starting, at that point. And the 2019 National was the first time that I got to meet a lot of those other sports card collectors who I had interacted with online, and they'd been on, I'd talked to them for the blog, or I'd been on their shows for an interview, and we got a chance to meet face to face for the first time. And that is just kind of such a cool experience that's hard to describe if folks haven't done that yet. The 2023 National is going to be back in Chicago this year, and I'll be there, and I'm definitely looking forward to that opportunity to connect with a whole nother segment of people that I've met for the first time, including, folks like yourself over these last couple of years. So I don't know if you're going to be at this summer's National or not, but there's a whole bunch of people that I can't wait this coming year.
right. Unfortunately, due to some family commitments, I'm not going to be able to make this year's, but I hope on getting another one. But what was really fun about last year's is I was honored to be a part of what I consider wrestling card history. They did a live stream panel from the National, all on wrestling cards, hosted by Paul and Tony. And we had the Tancredi brothers from the Wrestling Card podcast, and they had Caleb, who does a lot of the indie stuff, collecting with Caleb, myself. And we were able to speak on wrestling cards and the history of, and it was such an honor to be asked to do that and to be a part of what I consider wrestling card history, because that was a first. Mm-hmm. This year is going to be even better. I'm unfortunately not going to be able to make that one, but it would be a blast. I mean, I'll be watching when they do that again this year.
There's so many positives that come from cards in the card community and being able to participate and interact with other collectors. But I always feel like there's areas that we can grow and that areas that we can improve on. From your perspective, with the experience that you've had, both kind of researching and building a knowledge base, but also now interacting with other people and helping share that knowledge, is there anything from your perspective that you think we can improve on as a card collecting community?
Uh, yes, but it's just my opinion. I think there's a big division in the hobby now over old school and modern. And I don't like to see that because in the end, we're all just card collectors and we're all doing the same thing. I mean, it's pictures of guys on cardboard. That's all it is, you know? And to have such a division in the hobby right now really disturbs me. I hate to see that. I try to stay positive all the time, but it's just that's just kind of what hurts me is just the division in the hobby right now. I think we can do better. The name calling and the things like that. It's just got to stop. But it's not. It seems to have settled down some now. But in the last year or so, it got pretty heated, and I just wasn't a fan of that. You know, I'm just a fan of sharing my collection and helping people out what I can do. You know.
Whenever I'm talking with collectors who have been involved in collecting for a long time, I always like to ask, what advice do you have for new wrestling card collectors?
You know what? Just go after what you enjoy collecting. Don't listen to other people. You know, if someone says, "Oh, you just need to collect all this stuff," you know, don't listen to them. Look at something, find something you like, go after it. If you want to be just a player collector and you want to collect, say, just Roman Reigns, do it. If you want to collect just Matt Riddle, do it. If you want to be a set collector like me, do it. Just do what makes you happy, what you can afford to do. Don't put yourself in debt over it. I was guilty of that for a long time. I finally got my head above water again, but of course I was collecting everything. But don't just let people sway you. I mean, you can ask people for advice, or you could contact me and say, "Hey, what sets did you like best?" And maybe they can take a look at it and say, "Oh yeah, that is pretty cool." Or, "Nah, I think that stinks. I don't want that." You know, just do what makes you happy and what you can afford. That's the key to it.
I also, you're talking about your focus now. You're going back in and filling in some different holes from the older stuff that you had been kind of building out. Are there any particular cards or sets that are kind of high on your priority list right now?
Well, actually, yes. There's a series of cards that Topps put out several years ago, and they released them in their hobby boxes. I think they might have been in their blasters too, but they were tribute cards, and they released them over a series of 4 different sets. Like you might have cards 1 through 10 in their flagship. Cards 11 through 20 would be in Road to WrestleMania. Cards 21 through 30 would be in the following set, like Heritage or something. And they build up, and there was like 10 or 12 different ones. And I've completed about half of them, but there's still some that I'm still looking to fill in the blanks. I'd like to complete those sets of 40 just for my own personal enjoyment. You know, the hardest ones was some of the latter ones like Randy Savage and Undertaker. Those are really difficult to complete. And but the earlier ones like Hogan and Sting and I mean, I just got a whole bunch of them. I mean, even Ronda Rousey has one. I've just got so many of them, but I've been focusing on those a lot because you get on eBay and you can find most of them. You know, they might be missing 1 or 2 here and there, but those are the ones I'm focusing on completing right now.
Very, very nice. Is there anything else you want people to know before we go today?
Uh, just I just want to thank everybody who's reached out to me and been so great with me. Um, I've made some really good friends in this hobby, and I appreciate everybody just helping me out. And I'm glad that you think enough of me to take my my little snippets of wisdom and So just collect and enjoy the hobby. Go back and check out some of those old school stuff if you haven't for a while. People say, what do you do? Put these cards in a binder and never see them again? Oh, no, no, no. I put them in a binder, and about once a week I pull a binder out and I sit there and I flip through them, and I just enjoy the just the nostalgia that comes from looking at these cards. So just hang in there, and it's just it can be a fun hobby. Just don't let it take over your life like it did mine for a while, and you'll enjoy it. It's just a nice hobby to get into.
Well, I appreciate you being willing to come spend a few minutes and chat a little bit today. Like I said, I've been doing a ton of learning over these last couple of years, and I always appreciate those folks who are open to questions, who go on other shows and share their knowledge, who contribute to the different resources and websites like wrestlingtradingcards.com. And so your contributions are definitely one of those things that help me learn and help me get up to speed and understand more about the history of cards and some of those older sets. And so it means a lot to me that you were willing to come on and have a conversation today. So thanks again, Chuckster. And for all of you out there, if you're just starting to dabble, start following Chuckster and start digging into some of the things that he contributes to, because he's got a lot of info to share, and he can help get you up to speed pretty quickly. So thanks,
Thank you.
Chuckster.
And you'll be seeing a Chuckster card arriving next week.
That's right. Yeah, we'll have to check out this wrestling card collector set that's going to be put out via Tony, right? Tony's store is where that's going to be available.
Tony's going to be selling them, but they were produced by Paul and Ann from the Wrestling Card Price Guide. They were designed by Adrian Brown from KAGE. The boxes were made by Joypad Lad. So a lot of people in the community had a hand in getting this together, but they are going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to it. And just seeing everybody that I've interacted with online for so long, get to see an actual picture now.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm a part of that set as well, but there's I think 50 people that are going to be in the set, and I know that there's some of those that I don't even know who they are, and so I'm looking forward to seeing that full lineup and the full checklist as well.
Exactly. We have it up on WTC already, by the way.
Okay, I'll check it out. Thanks again, Chuckster.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking time to talk with me. See you, everybody.